say there is a bad deal and say there is a ceasefire, or say that Russia even was to occupy most of Ukraine and to effectively win the war. Well, he says the Americans should be aware that at that point there will be a battle-hardened army of Ukrainian men who will then be taking orders from Vladimir Putin, and that's not something anybody should want. Which was such a sort of startling thing to say that I've never heard that before, and I was so startled by the idea of it that I have come to the conclusion that this is. I mean, obviously, it's a war. It is very dangerous, but this particular segment of the war seems incredibly dangerous, and there are all kinds of unintended consequences that could spring from rash decisions. So, while Trump may not have a moral calculus in play, you do have to hope that he's thinking ahead of 24 hours.
Donald Trump has had his first post-election victory phone call with President Zelensky of Ukraine. Also on the call, Elon Musk, whose Starlink satellite systems are essential for Ukraine's military communications. The president-elect has repeatedly said he will end the war in Ukraine in one day. The Sunday Times' Will Lloyd joins us from Kyiv. Good morning, Will.
Good morning, Callum. Hello.
Shall we start with this call, which is, standard procedure, isn't it? New president or president-elect having conversations with world leaders, that's fine. Elon Musk joining the call is a slightly intriguing part of this.
I would love to know what exactly Elon Musk's role in the second Trump administration is. It does seem to be a sort of Swiss Army knife where he both gets to sort of cut things out of the US government and also, I don't know, set fire to things and just generally roll around like a giant ball of chaos. But in Ukrainian terms, it's not Musk who is fixated on. It's very interesting speaking to people here about what they expect from Trump. Certainly, the 24-hour peace deal is a big meme here. In September, Trump kind of rode it back a little bit and said that the deal would be he had a deal made. Now, what exactly that means and what Ukrainian participation in that deal would look like, whether Trump is just going to sort of give orders to the Ukrainians and whether he can give orders to the Ukrainians is something that fascinates me. Putin was very complimentary about Trump on Thursday. He called him courageous for the way he took that assassin's bullet to his ear in July. One Washington analyst I spoke to said that a deal between Russia and America is actually not that difficult to imagine simply because of the mutual admiration society that built up between Trump and Putin, whereas Biden was obviously scathingly critical of Putin whenever he could be. And that made it impossible for Putin to accept any deal from him. But what all that misses is what Ukrainians think.
And what do they think, I suppose? Is there a feeling of concern, of optimism? How would you describe what you're picking up, Will?
Well, I went to a double funeral yesterday at a crematorium just outside Kyiv. It was quite an unusual funeral because it was a couple who were both in the military who had been killed by a Russian glide bomb, and it was appalling. I mean, the sorrow was appalling. The tears and the grief and the sense of the cost of war, the horrible weight of war on the Ukrainian people was in the air. It was totally apparent, and I think that Ukrainians are in a pretty difficult and dark place now. It's not collapse. The war's not over, but certainly I haven't met anybody who looks at the situation with optimism. But what you do find is a willingness to be frank about the way the war is going. So one analyst said to me that the February 2022 model between the Democrats and the Ukrainian government and the way the war's conducted just isn't working anymore. And we shouldn't look at the personalities around the White House. We shouldn't look at Musk and Trump. We should think about the structures and whether the structures can change and whether that can be positive for Ukraine. A guy who is a commander in one of the famous regiments here was telling me that he felt as if the Democrats were actually quite hypocritical. They were liars. They hadn't supported Ukraine in the way that they said they would. And he owned a MAGA cap, but it wasn't MAGA, it was Make Ukraine Great Again. And he welcomed Trump's victory and thought it would usher in a new era of honesty in Ukrainian-American relations. So there you go. I mean, there was another Ukrainian who told me that, any bad deal will only be considered a recommendation to the Ukrainian people. And I think the overall thing that I definitely felt, speaking to everybody here who I spoke to, was, if the Americans try and force them into a ceasefire deal or freezing the conflict that they don't like, I think a lot of Ukrainians will keep fighting, and I don't know what that would look like.
Yeah. I think it's fascinating to work out where the pressure from Trump will end up, as you say. Is it on Putin? Is it on Zelensky? Is it on both of them? And how does that work? There was one suggestion that one of his tactics in all of this might be to suggest to Ukraine that if they don't sort of approach something resembling negotiation towards peace, that he would then withhold military support for them. And similarly, if Putin didn't go for a negotiation, that in fact he would really increase support for Ukraine's weapons. So I just wonder if within all of this, if there's a moral clarity in Trump as to who the good guy is and who the bad guy is.
I don't know. Yeah. I don't know if he. I mean, there's never been a suggestion from Trump's record in his first term that morality was part of his calculus. Yeah. He was very happy to meet with people, like Kim Jong-un, who fed dissidents in their regime to dogs. I mean, Trump was very happy to hang out with him in Singapore and try and make a deal with him. I think the Ukrainians definitely feel that this is going to be more transactional. Mm. And so the Ukrainian analyst was saying to me that really they need to make themselves attractive to Trump. They need to make Ukraine a good option for Trump, something that he would want to invest in, something that he needs to invest in, something that will give America something back. And I think some of Zelensky's comments have seemed to suggest that that's the way that they're thinking now as well. Mm. Possibly the most interesting thing anybody said to me on this was that if say there is a bad deal, and say there is a ceasefire, or say that Russia even was to occupy most of Ukraine and to effectively win the war, well, he says the Americans should be aware that at that point there will be a battle-hardened army of Ukrainian men who will then be taking orders from Vladimir Putin, and that's not something anybody should want. Which was such a sort of startling thing to say that I've never heard that before, and I was so startled by the idea of it that I have come to the conclusion that this is. I mean, obviously it's a war; it is very dangerous, but this particular segment of the war seems incredibly dangerous, and there are all kinds of unintended consequences that could spring from rash decisions. So, while Trump may not have a moral calculus in play, you do have to hope that he's thinking ahead of 24 hours.
Yeah. Will, it's always good to speak to you. Thank you very much. Thanks for coming on.
Thank you.
That's the Sunday Times' Will Lloyd reporting from Kyiv.